to all the fellow panelists. Good morning to all the very, I can see, significant number of attendees. It's a pity we are meeting in this online mode, which certainly restricts, I think, the participants of the panel from expressing themselves, I think, as well as they may have in person. And of course, for all of you to have the benefit of personal interaction, but we'll try and make it as involved and as interactive as possible. You've already heard about the background of the very, very experienced and distinguished panel. And I believe that no better group could perhaps address this very, very difficult theme of agriculture overall and how CSR could support agriculture value chain growth, development, and how that in turn would impact our very troubled agriculture sector. All of us as citizens have witnessed the last year and a half of turmoil, which, as you know, arose from very good intentions to bring some reform, some change, and ultimately some benefit to farmers and the farming sector. But perhaps these things are more complicated. The path to reform is always rocky. We have a history now since 1991, whether it's in the financial sector, the industrial sector, and perhaps agriculture is the most difficult of all. But given the fact that something like 2/3 of the country's population is still in agriculture, roughly half the workforce is still dependent on agriculture, but the contribution to the GDP is barely 17%. This makes for a very inequitous and potentially very conflict-ridden situation. So far, the perception is that it's largely the government and state investments which have sought to solve the problems and challenges of agriculture. But increasingly, the market-driven, I would say, agriculture, and I think this one statistic would be pertinent to quote here. In the last 20 years, the value of the agri-GDP, if you take it as 100 rupees, about 20 years ago, 75 rupees came from cereals, pulses, and oilseeds, and only 25 rupees from what we call the high-value agriculture, which is horticulture, poultry, fisheries, livestock. Today, that equation has reversed. Today, 75 rupees comes from these high-value commodities and only 25% from the old crops like cereals and oilseeds and pulses. So that means increasingly the market is driving agriculture, but the market perhaps is not being able to integrate as well as it should, as we've seen in other economies, not just, let's say, in America or Europe, but also in our neighborhood in Southeast Asia and most recently in China. So we are going to hear from this panel about, number one, their specific experiences with investing through CSR in agri-value chains. And I would say more than the specific model, which I'm sure we are all interested in, we'd like to hear what are the lessons for a wider audience, the companies, the other representatives of the CSR world who are present here. How do we use these few examples of success, which I'm sure you will hear about, into a broader movement within the CSR sector? So I'm not going to take any further time because I'm sure that all of you want to hear the panelists, and we also want to keep some time at the end to hear questions from the audience so that the panelists could react. And there's one person here who's actually had a very successful implementation of an agri-value chain in a very unique sector like coffee. So Mr. Amit Kumar Singh of Tanager has a complete value chain success model in coffee. And Amitji, I would like you to initiate the discussion and briefly share with us. You have about 7 to 8 minutes for your presentation. And as I said, it will be very helpful to this audience if you could draw some larger lessons from your experience, which others could benefit from. So over to you, please.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much for giving such an introduction and talking very high about us. Actually, we are from a company called Tanager, which is an affiliate of ACDI VOCA, which works in 52 countries. And we have a history of making cooperatives, farmer collectives, So 53 years back, we did a study funded by USA, which led to formation of IFCO. So worldwide, we make cooperatives, we work on agri-value chains. And you rightly said, Mr. Sharma, that 75% of the value comes, the share of GDP comes from the high value crops. And you will be surprised to know that majority of these high value crops are being grown by small and marginal farmers, which comprises of, I don't know the exact current data, but it's around 89%. So a huge number of population, small marginal population, they grow, these high value crops, they grow fresh fruits and vegetables, they grow horticultural crops, plantations. So there are many works, but if you look at, the vulnerability, so they are most vulnerable because there is no investment, back-end investment. They are not protected much by any sort of laws, and they have very less negotiating powers because their land size is very small, production is very scattered, and thanks this government has come up with, I know you were in SFSE, you took this movement forward for FPOs. So we are very lucky that this movement is taking up. So one of the problem that is happening, I don't know, it is with every part of the country, but in 4 or 5 states, what we are seeing, and there was a recent study also by Ajim Premji Foundation. So if you look at the success rate of FPOs, if you just keep aside the dairy value chain, so most of the FPOs are struggling. Why? Because there is no investment. And for the audience, the knowledge, I just wanted to let them know that, in FPO, there cannot be a non-producer. And irrespective of the number of shares, the farmer has only one voting right. So now see the situation. Nobody will come and invest in FPOs. And that becomes a challenge. So when we started working on coffee, everybody said, look, we should not take the coffee because it's very risky. From where you will bring the investment? I said, okay, let's start. We'll see. If we fail, okay, we'll acknowledge we failed because of these reasons. Because failures also gives a lot of lessons for others who start. Because writers, brothers, they could never have invented plane if his predecessors have not worked or experimented. So similarly, we started in coffee value chain, and we started with a very small work. We first thought, what are those value proposition for the farmers so that farmers become FPO ready and they are willing to sell their coffee beans, the parchment coffee, to the FPOs, and what are those value proposition or USP that FPO can create in that ecosystem where financiers are ready, they see this FPC or FPO as a bankable FPO, and other partners, they're willing to come and help this FPO. So the story started, we did very small interventions, like first we did that how quality could be improved, how the moisture can be maintained, how they can dry it or not on the road or in a nasty place, rather than we demonstrated the how they can dry it on a tarpaulin. So the kind of the parchment Arabica coffee, it started coming from the the members of this FPC. Many investors, the buyers, they got attracted. Like Tata Coffee, they purchased 60 metric ton last year, and they are saying, whatever quantity you have, just let us know. Similarly, one exporter, Wahan from Hyderabad, they are exporters. They want Arabica coffee, parchment Arabica coffee, and every buyer, they want to advance, because this was one of the major challenge from where the capital will come, because whether it's FPO or any entity, they need to pay these farmers immediately, because we are salaried people. We get salary every month. So you can say, they get a seasonal salary. So when crop will be harvested, they want the immediate money. So that was one challenge we could mitigate. Second was we thought, okay, from here we want these FPO to take more value chain functions, so that now apart from FPO income, the farmers' income can be raised. So what we did, we partnered with one processor in Bangalore, which does processing for many big companies. So when we told them that, look, we are working for FPOs, so he was earlier not willing to go for a small batch of processing. So when he heard that, okay, this is for the farmers have their own company. So we signed an MOU. They processed a small batch of filter coffee. And if you look at, the kind of packaging and the quality of the product, there's a very high demand. I won't take the name of one biggest distributor. They are willing to keep this coffee in their 600 stores in South India, filter coffee. And also beside that, they will also keep this. So they are willing to launch their own brand. They will write processed and packaged by Dhimsa producer company. So both the product will be there. So this is the, what I want to say, that, nothing is impossible. You need to analyze the value chain. You need to see from where, which value, up to which value chain function they can go. What are those functions they can adopt? So it may happen that they cannot own it, but they can partner with. So ecosystem creation is very important if you want the FPOs to grow. So we created that ecosystem. Even government is now helping. So everybody is now willing to help. Once you created a success, everybody joins you, and it becomes, ecosystem. It becomes very easy for you to create that ecosystem. And the next step, which we are going to do it, is, the instant coffee. And very soon you will see, in all the e-commerce sites that Dhimsa coffee is available. I think by 20th or so, you will see, this product is available. So there, nothing can limit that FPC. You need to think through and the problems, the hurdles, and how you can remove it. No one, I can say no one, even the government, the NGO, or any, for that sake, anybody cannot solve all the problems. You'll have to do partnership. You'll have to bring good partners to make it happen. So this is all from my side, Dr. Sharma. Thank you.
Thank you, Amitji. That's a very inspiring story. Some questions arise in my mind, which I'm sure I'll come back to you when we've had one round hearing everyone. And I'm going to invite Saurabh now for his inputs, given that you represent one of the largest CSR foundations in India. It's associated with obviously a household brand name now. I'd specifically request you to dwell on, when you have a choice of CSR investment, what would make you look at something like agriculture overall and agri-value chains specifically, versus, let's say, education or health, or and other many desirable sectors which are eligible and I would say worthy of support. So I think the impact that large organizations like yours have on the sector, because there is, after all, peer learning, and the success that you perhaps have would inspire many others compared to a smaller entity which may have achieved the same. So if you could please share your thoughts on how you see this whole sector as a potential attracting CSR funding, and B, if there are any lessons from your specific experience, please do share them. Over to you, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sharma. And first thing, I'd like to appreciate the first part wherein you gave a very detailed description and set the context very well. I have, apart from being a banker, I have another side of me, which is I'm son of a horticulturist and grew up in agriculture university campus. So and agriculture has always been a very passionate subject for me. And I think now heading a foundation, given my background, I really take a lot of personal interest in the subject. Now, I would start by saying that what did we observe in the last 2 years? During COVID, we saw a breakdown of rural supply chain, and all the formal supply chains succeeded like anything. So that was a huge learning for everyone, that the rural supply chain, which is an informal supply chain, can collapse at the drop of a hat. And what happened? The farmers got less money, and we as consumers paid higher price. So somewhere there was a challenge which was very difficult to address, and we looked at it very closely. Now, what is the difference? When you look at a formal supply chain, all of us know the e-commerce organization, so we need not name them. They have capital, they have technology, they have laid out processes, and they have competent people who are managing it. So it's a combination of multiple intelligence and multiple processes supported by technology, and they are able to do everything at a very small cost. Now that comes with a scale. Now, the subject we are dealing with, these are very small value chains, and they have none of these. Everything that I mentioned for e-commerce company is actually absent in this rural value chain. And the scale which we are talking, more than 6 lakh villages across the country. Some village could be close to a city, some village could be hundreds of miles from a city. So every rural scenario has a very different requirement. So, I mean, when I look at it as a head of a foundation, my interest is that how the farmers can raise their income from wherever they are. And who are the people who can help me do this? So first realization I have is, if we do not appreciate the entrepreneurs who are operating in that area, nothing will happen. For any value chain to thrive, the starting point is an entrepreneur. And that rural entrepreneur, I mean, now we have hearing various names of social enterprise, but they have existed and thrived for years, and they decide the price. And why do they decide the price? There are various issues in the value chain. If you go and look at it very closely, I'll just give a small example, that the quality of grain which is produced, the grading, sorting, cleaning is not done by the farmers. It's actually done by the entrepreneur. So the entire produce is picked up and taken to the mandi and reaches some entrepreneur who then do the grading, sorting and cleaning. And the produce which we are receiving has actually been somewhat processed by somebody in between, which the farmers are not doing. Now, how can a foundation intervene? So first part is very simple processes of can we teach people to do first level of processing, which gives them a higher value in the value chain. Second, all of us know that a lot of the produce gets wasted because the marketable produce and the produce has some amount of difference. We always like all our produce to be of same shape and size, whereas when the farmer produces, gets in various shapes and sizes. So that gives the need of food processing. And can foundation assist in food processing centers? So far we have set up 6 food processing centers in various parts of the country, and we are experimenting how these food processing centers are benefiting the rural population. And all these food processing centers are run by the local people. We don't intend to run anything. So where I'm coming from is one part, the rural entrepreneurs are extremely important to that value chain. The next part, what we have seen in the last 2 years, is startups. Tremendous amount of agri startups, agri-related startups, agri-technology startups, which was missing for centuries. So we have a set of very brilliant individuals coming up with various solutions. Some are about production, some are about packaging, and some are about value chain. So somewhere we need to support these startups, because, as I earlier said, setting up an urban value chain is easy because the number of people in that value chain is very high. The rural value chains have a lower quantity of products and lesser number of people. So it's always more expensive to set up anything in rural India. Now that's where foundations have to come in and support, whether it's a startup or an FPO or a self-help group or even an individual. Now, when you read some of the economic theories of growth and growth of rural societies, let's agree that there is no single model which has succeeded anywhere in the world. Whether capital will lead to growth or whether labor will lead to growth. So we believe that individuals will lead to growth. So in every micro market, I mean, it was very good to hear Amit speak about the coffee value chain, and we'll give a lot of credit to people like Amit who have dedicated the time on that. Now, Amit cannot replicate it across the country. So we have to identify several Amits and several people. It's not just one model. FPO is one great model. We have established 2 FPOs working very well. But my experience, it's very difficult to replicate. It's not easy to replicate because people have their own wants, desires, and the method of working. So several places, self-help groups have worked very well. And several places, an informal group of individuals have worked. So if you ask my experience of running a foundation for last 5 years, I would go by a micro market and requirements of a micro market. So currently we are working in 2,500 villages, and I'm absolutely open to 2,500 models. And that's where I always say that being an ICICI bank, I mean, capital is there and support of the board is there, that you can experiment and create models which are replicable in. So if I've created food processing, probably it can get replicated in 1,000 places. If I've worked on FPO with dairy, probably it can be replicated in another 1,000 places. But when we're talking of 6 lakh plus villages, probably we'll also need to create 1,000 models, and each of these models would be unique to that area and catering to the development of people of that area. So that's what I wanted to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Saurabh. Very, very important takeaways. And I'll have a couple of follow-up questions for you after this round. But thanks again for sharing these insights. Rishi, Pathania ji, you, and I will also alert Chaitanya, you are the 2 agri players here on this panel. And one would expect that the CSR investments of these players would have a bias towards agri investments. Number one, is that so? And if that is so, how do you choose what you are going to invest in? Is it merely to enhance the core technology or product that your company brings to the market, or a much broader vision informs these investments, specifically your approach to agri-value chains? So Rishi ji, if you could have the next 6-7 minutes to share your thoughts.
Thank you, Mr. Sharma. Thank you so much. First of all, a small clarification. Even though we are a crop care company, but our maximum investment has been on education in the last 50 years. Primarily, we felt that's something that was needed. Of late, we have included that in our social focus area. First of all, Mr. Sharma, I would like to build up on what you said. And I think at a personal level, I think India's agriculture is as diverse as India itself. I guess no other country in the world produces as much agriculture variety that India has. Even though it's always being said that our productivity is one of the least in world, but I think it's one of the best if you take per unit as in land. So our returns is one of the best because it's very diverse. You've got agriculture, you've got horticulture, you've got animal husbandry, everything attached to that single piece of land. So our return from farmer is possibly one of the best. Even though we may be one of the lowest producer per capita, but I think we still top list of different products where we are one of the best globally. So I would like to start my presentation with celebrating that farmers' capacity in India and what they have delivered in last so many years. Sir, if I have to speak about, in the interest of time, I'll not go much into what all that we are doing, but what we have learned and how we are taking that learning forward. I think that will be more helpful for all of us. I think what we realized working in agriculture development under CSR, it's not only the backward linkage or capacity building that will help us in long run, if you have to really deliver benefit to the farmer. I think we realize it's the complete value chain model that will help. And specifically, and as Saurabh was saying, the supply chain part was a big missing link in this whole value chain. And when this whole lockdown started, we experimented and we started with a small group of strawberry farmers in Dang district. And the returns that we were able to give them was phenomenal. And that was a learning point for us. And we realized this is an area of intervention that we really need to work on. And as Saurabh was saying, it's not only the only FPO model. We definitely have very strong 6 FPOs that we are working with, plus also in partnership with other organizations, we have 6 more FPOs. But the SHGs, their federation, we have roped in everyone because that's something which will give a long-term benefit to the farmer. That's something which will really help in doubling the income of the farmers. Also, not only restricting to the group structure, we have also worked on an individual structure. We picked up few very small entrepreneurs from the market. We saw someone in Ankleshwar who was procuring from different farmers and taking it to different canteens and mandis. So we extended a support to this particular entrepreneur, and we created something called as Fresh Veg to You. It's actually a van model. And the kind of success that we received for this particular entrepreneur motivated us to go a little further on this. So we have now 3 more onboarded in this model. So the whole idea is, in fact, we are making it a kind of an app-based model where farmer producer goes to this particular entrepreneur and it goes to different canteens to mandis and everything. Essentially, what I'm focusing on is, if you really want to bring in benefit to the farmer, I think the first learning for us is it has to be a complete value chain model, 1. 2, there should be a scope of convergence and partnership. Maybe when Saurabh was talking about this idea of setting up the cold chain, maybe we can also jointly work together and how it can benefit a large group of farmers. So convergence and partnership is second, which is very important. And third is, I think the most fundamental is the ownership is to be with the farmers. We cannot create a model where it's dependent on an NGO or a CSR partner or government in the long run. I think these are the important learnings that we realized in last 2 years. And we have focused a lot on the agriculture value chain in last 2 years. We have picked up different crops like rice. We have picked up vegetable. We have picked up tur dal. We have made a point that it's not going to be a one-off initiative, either of a backward linkage or building capacity or some capacity, but we'll work only on a complete value chain to ensure that farmer gets complete benefit of that. I'll take a pause here because I think it was important for me to just share the learning part and how we are going ahead on this. I'll be happy to reply, Mr. Sharma, if you got any question based on this.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. This is very, very interesting. And the convergence in some of the thinking, I'm sure you have not discussed this before the panel. And I'll come back, maybe one question seems to be emerging, which at least in the last three speakers, the same thing about partnerships and collaborations. There's one missing elephant in the room. Let me alert you. I'm going to ask you, why is it that this kind of CSR investment is not crowding in government investment, which is still the primary source of investment in agri-value chain? So please dwell on this for a minute, and I'll come back after our youngest friend on the panel, Chaitanya, has shared his thoughts. Again, I'll ask you to begin with the same. UPL surprised us by saying their focus on CSR is education. Interesting. What's yours and why? Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Sharma. Good morning to my co-panelists, audience, and thank you, CSRBOX, for giving this opportunity. I echo with all the speakers in this panel where we say collaboration is a way to go forward, and value chains is the topic that we need to pick up and take it forward. Coming to set the context, Bayer CSR is driven with our vision statement, which is health for all, hunger for none, with main focus on innovation and sustainability, which fuels our purpose, science for a better life. Having said that, our core CSR has rural development as a main focus. We do give comprehensive solutions to the rural communities where we do agricultural based interventions, healthcare based interventions, and education based interventions. So we give a complete comprehensive solutions to the communities in which we work. I will today focus only on agricultural based interventions that we undertake under CSR activities. Like rightly said, strengthening and capacity building of rural communities is the prime focus of CSR activities, right? We look at the entire agri-value chain. The major components in the capacity building are majorly agronomy, integrated crop management, digital financial literacy, etc., etc. The way we do it was earlier through collaborations with grassroots NGOs, and we used to build the capacity of the NGO field staffs because they are the first point of contact for the farmers to connect to. So that is how we used to operate. And we always used to connect the local KVKs for the knowledge transfer to these NGOs. Of course, we do identify and train the progressive farmers to showcase and motivate other farmers to join. But in order to achieve long-lasting sustainable impact, we need to ensure that these trainings are refreshed and reiterated to the smallholder farmers. And that's where the role of CBBOs or FPOs or SHGs could be leveraged. And that's where we are engaging with the FPOs. But like we all, most of us would agree that FPOs till now have been functioning as a community institutions and not as a business entities. As a result, they are not able to give a meaningful impact to the smallholder farmers. But FPOs can be a very good medium to provide sustainable income. We work closely with the existing FPOs only, and we believe if the FPOs are incubated and capacities built, they would be a very successful enterprises as well. So we focus majorly on establishing structures in the FPOs. We talk about governance, management structures, building the board capacities of FPOs. Now, there is always the debate that these FPOs are already there, right? They're already formed with all the funding which is received and everything. But FPOs are also business entities. Like startups require incubation period, right? You need to build the capacity of the office bearers. That is what is missing according to us. And that's why we are working with the structures of the FPO. We are working with the value chain mapping, creating their business models, piloting and adapting the products that can be market fit, build alternate livelihood models, build capacity and agronomy through the FPOs to the smallholder farmers, whatever is locally applicable. And then we look at scalability and financial viability of the business models. Of course, we also look at diversifying business lines to include high value activities such as processing or any other value added activities. And the major component is peer learnings. So we take up the FPOs in a cluster format where it is a combination of a fully functioning FPO versus various stages where they can have a peer learning which can happen amongst themselves. Power of collaboration is a key principle for a successful enterprise, and FPO is no exception. And that's the reason why we look at this. And finally, I would also like to bring that we are an agricultural based company and agronomy is our key strength. So we are now working with other corporates and NGOs in rural communities as their knowledge partners to deliver, share the technology, train their farmers, and help smallholders to have enhanced productivity and incomes. So to summarize and to come back to your first question, where and how do we decide, or what are the do we promote the products? No, CSR Foundation is completely an independent entity for Bayer Group. We do not function under Bayer group as such. So we are completely independent and our initiatives are standalone and they promote whatever is locally suitable and viable at that communities. And we are spread across almost 12 states in India. I'll take a pause here and happy to engage in the questions. Thank you, Mr. Sharma.
Thank you, Chaitanya. Thank you. And again, very, very useful learnings. We now have almost 200 participants. So I think they would really benefit from the thoughts that I'm going to ask you to now share. We have about 8 minutes for before we open it up to the audience questions. So I'm quickly going to throw two questions one by one, and I request all of you to react to those. I'll pick up this collaboration theme and come back to what I said. While you have referred or hinted that there is some amount of inter-company collaboration, and I'm sure that's not so difficult to achieve, how do you see leveraging the CSR investment with mainstream government investment so that the impact that you are seeking to create can be enhanced? Saurabh, if you could start with this.
Thank you, Mr. Sharma. I mean, the other work which I do for ICICI Bank is head the government banking business. So I work very closely with the government. And let me give 2-3 examples of where this can be leveraged very well. Some of us may have heard something called RCT or Root City, Rural Self-Employment Training Institute. For some reason, it was handed over to banks. We don't know the exact reason why banks were asked to implement this, but that's how it happened. And luckily, there are 2 of them with ICICI Bank, and we work in Udaipur and Jodhpur district very closely. And that's an excellent model. Because we have those 2 centers, the kind of work we are able to do in these 2 districts is far better. I mean, I would say 100 times better than any other district. So first learning, Root City, which comes under Ministry of Rural Development, if that is used as an anchor and along with that development work is done in the district, the potential to deliver results, I see it as 100 times higher. So that's one model. Next, Chaitanya just mentioned KVK. Several places we are working with KVK. And when I mention this, I would always put my understanding of it. See, in most of the models, people are taught that there is a KVK where you have specialists. And then there are people who need that specialist. They are in their homes. So the gap is KVK is situated at one place, the farmers are situated at another place. Now, who's going to bridge this gap? Either take the farmers to KVK or take the KVK official to the farmers. A major role CSR can play there, and it works very well. Same example I'll give for Department of Fisheries. They're again sitting in their office. Again, some of us can either take them to the villages or take the villagers to their office. And wherever we have tried this, tremendous results, very good results, and a lot of support from all government officials. So every scheme of government, whether it's Manrega or every state government has their own fishery development, orchard development, all kinds of schemes are there. So what we set as a theme, collaboration with the government and understanding what are the schemes a particular government is running and how to take them to rural India and make it work. So connecting the dots is what I would say foundations can do, because foundations have the money to spend in connecting the dots. So that resource is somewhere missing in most of the plans. So the government scheme says, I will give a farmer so much of money if they does that. But then that hand holding, that minor small amount of money, if invested, the government schemes will be far more successful than they are as of today. That's my.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And I am especially impressed by your focus on the institutional collaboration. And I think this is a great lesson that you are sharing with this audience. And of course, other panelists might endorse this, that instead of going after a specific official or an individual, you are looking at institutions. And of course, the largest number of institutions in the rural and agri sector in particular still are in the government space. So great insights from you. Thank you so much. Amitji, what is your take on this? How do you enhance your work, not necessarily through money investment, but the collaborations that Saurabh also talked about?
Sir, I like the way Saurabh spoke about, there cannot be a blanket approach. You need models. And when it comes to scaling up, so without leveraging government support, it's not possible, because nobody has that resources or that channel or delivery channel. So you must think of collaborating with the local government, with the state government, and with the central government. I'll give you one very good example. I'll start with the policy. Like, if you look at the Schedule 7, so agriculture has not been mentioned as a separate subject. It comes under rural. The first thing, the CSR agencies and others who are working on the policy front, they can mention agriculture as a separate subject, because when it comes to rural development, so other works becomes very easy, and agriculture is really a risky proposition for everyone to work on because of the many factors, the climate, the other risks, so many things. So that is one. Second is, like Saurabh was telling about, the institutions. All these schemes, if are properly channeled, then whatever you are doing, either on the value chain or with the FPOs, it can succeed to a greater level and can be scaled up. I'll give you one example. We are working, with the state government of Odisha. So when government came, our task became very easy, because earlier, we raised to a small number of FPOs. Now there is a demand to reach to a larger number of FPOs. So we are creating those lighthouse FPOs. The approach is different with the different government. In UP, our approach is different. So we brought the corporate first, who can take off the mean. And so I think there cannot, we can't point out, the blanket thing which can apply to entire India. So you'll have to look at the institution, you'll have to look at the policy, you'll have to look at the schemes, and also most important, the agencies like SFAC, NABARD, NAFED, who are, leading.
I'm just going to intervene for a minute, because we are apparently having to conclude at 11:25 and not 11:30, as I assume. So I'm going to go quick 1.5 minutes each to Rishi and to Chaitanya.
Shall I say thank you?
No. I'm sure you'd like to react.
Sir, I'll just
I think it would be nice if
I'll be very quick.
Have one or two questions to the panel.
Yeah, apart from looking at the big institutions like KVKs or RCTs, I think there's a huge scope if you just look left and right. I'll give a specific example. We have a Kaju processing belt from Vapi till Dang, Kaprada. There's one unit which was non-functional. We took that, Kaju processing started. We were able to provide livelihood to 15 women in this whole pandemic. This was possible only with the partnership with district administration. Now, this is a kind of a scope that's there. We cannot be just relying on the big NABARD and all that we have been listening for so many years. But I think it's a high time that we just get into district administration, see left and right what are the things available there. And Mr. Sharma, you have been administrator for a long time. There's so many schemes. There's a food processing unit lying next to me. Now we are just building up a partnership with district administration, how we can take it forward so that we create a complete value chain. So my submission is, forget about the bigger things, not forget, but at least leave it for a few minutes, get into a district administration level, see what are available there, work on it. I think we'll be able to deliver much more benefits to the farmers. I'll take a pause here.
Opportunities are everywhere. That's what you're saying. Sorry, Chaitanya, you will have to really do it in a minute so that we can have some questions from the audience.
Minute is enough, Mr. Sharma. I echo with all the panelists what they said, and especially with what Mr. Rishi has said. See, the cluster-based approach where we talk about FPOs leveraging from other peer FPOs is a very important step, and they can always leverage the government schemes in the similar way, because what we are looking at is a well-established FPO in this cluster as well. So that facilitation is what foundations like us can make it happen and make the communication channel between these more transparent and more doable thing. Yeah, that I will rest here and take it.
Thank you, and I'm sorry I have to curtail this. I know this audience would love to hear this panel for at least another half an hour. So organizers, please note this, if you get some of these speakers, build in more time next time. So over to you. You choose the questions and the panel member to whom they want to be addressed.
Sure. Thank you, sir, again. And we are apologetic about the time crunch. I'll just introduce one question and you can decide whosoever wishes to answer. So the question is by Suhail, and the question is, do you think a FPO or a producer company can independently function on its own without the intervention of a foundation or promoting NGOs?
I think it has to function on its own for long-term sustainability. There's no shortcut to that. And I don't think anyone from my panel member will disagree to that. There's no doubt or debate about that. In fact, it will be sustainable only if it's function on its own. That's my submission.
I think we can take another question. So what is the process of identifying rural entrepreneurs? Anybody who would like to take this?
We have worked with many of them, but I'll not say that we have a very strong process where we have screened and everything. It's more of our presence in the field. We identified, we saw someone doing good work and we started collaborating and working with them. But maybe based on the question, I will definitely think about making a process so that we can onboard many more.
Saurabh, you specifically spoke about really, so maybe you could take this briefly.
I'll just add a comment on that. That enterprise and process are very different things. When you're talking enterprise, please don't talk process.
Yes.
Thank you, sir. And thank you, team, for the amazing discussion. I think the conversation about affordable agri-tech interventions and how they are useful for sustainable agri-value chain was very rewarding. And despite your answers being brief because of our time crunch, they were very fruitful for the audience. And the remaining questions, we can send them across, or even in the Q&A, you can directly answer them and have an interaction. So thank you, Pravesh, sir, and thank you everybody else for being here with us.
Thanks to this amazing panel for making it so rich. Thank you all.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.